points out is to sign. Now, there's nothing unique about the word sign in the Bible. It occurs countless times. And even on Pentecost Day, when St. Peter announced what's happening with the outpouring of the Holy Spirit, he says that there will be, Joel's prophecy said there would be signs in the heaven above, and incense on the earth below, blood and fire and billows of smoke, etc. So the word sign is nothing unique, but it is a word that John the Evangelist captures and takes it for himself and says, in my book, in my writings, sign is going to be a special word. And that's how your outline begins. That points out that the signs in John's Gospel are there specifically to reveal Jesus. And it's done through these 7 signs that many of you are familiar with, and we'll even give you the answers. It's all there on the handout.
No, it's not. They have a worksheet. They have
No,
a handout.
that's not until we go
You
home.
just get them all blank lines.
Pretty much.
Yeah, all blank.
All
She won't
blank.
let us have the handout till
Not
we go
the
home.
answer yet, so
No,
you
guys.
can pray now that they listen well.
Well,
She's a
pens and
tough-
pencils
Tough
then.
professor.
Okay,
Oh, my God.
so, please join me in prayer. Heavenly Father, as we look through the 7 signs of John's Gospel, open our eyes to once again behold wonderful things out of your law and out of the Gospels, so that we may be encouraged and that we might also get further insight into how great your love is for us through Jesus Christ, as we pray in his name. Amen. John's Gospel has its introduction at the end. It really does. You go to the very end of John's Gospel, and we sing it. We just sang it in the past church service. At the introduction to the Gospel, we sing, "These things are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God." But it leaves out the last line, which we included for you in your handout at the top. "These things are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name." So when I have time, I'll try and come up with the music to add to that refrain. But that's, in essence, that's John's summary of his book, but it's also the introduction to his book that he kind of leaves to the end. And so we will then spend this morning concentrating on the signs, the 7 signs, commonly accepted 7 signs of John's Gospel. And we will use the same approach to every sign, of who, what, when, where, why approach, and also to give away the end. We could spend equal time on all of them, and but we're not. We're going to save most of our time for the final ones. And so for all you fans of the water turned into wine, sorry, we're not going to spend a lot of time on that, even though it's one of my favorite miracles too. But with that further introduction,
Okay.
on to the signs.
Okay, so as you look at these signs, as we look at it, I want you to be thinking, what do they all have in common? And then, what is the end result? So, not that you're going to have that answer right away on the first one, but I do want you to kind of be thinking, what's a common thread or a commonness through all of these? So, we're not going to do a lot of reading of the scriptures today, but I would encourage you to open your Bibles to John chapter 2, 1 through 11. And we're just gonna, answer some of these questions a little bit, and then, so even what you remember and what's in the text. So John 2 is the wedding at Cana, and so what is the situation? They ran out of wine, that's right.
I was gonna say it's a party.
Okay, it's party, a little bit more specific, it's a wedding. What's
But
the
they
time
celebrate.
frame? What's the time frame on it? What's the when?
Third day of the celebration.
Right, so guess how long, and how long are the celebrations?
About 2
Days,
weeks.
Usually
Yeah.
7 days is
Oh,
what I heard.
I thought. 2.
Okay, so the situation, it's only the third day, they've run out of wine, we got 4 more days to party, as it were. Okay, so where are we? Cana, and who are the participants that we know of in the story?
Mary.
Mary,
disciples,
disciples,
Jesus,
the wedding couple,
servants,
mhm. 2 other key people,
servants,
servants,
and the master of the,
mhm. And the central figure is always,
Of course, Jesus.
and Jesus. So, and the reason I want you to I wanted you to mention all those people is because we're kind of starting out wide, and we're gonna kind of get narrow and see who gets privy to this information. So, all right, so I wrote, what's the remedy? So then what happens? We know they ran out of wine, but what are the steps now?
Mary approaches Jesus.
Mm-hmm. Mary says, Jesus, we don't have any wine. Okay,
Do you think that somebody else was aware of it though before that, like the master of ceremonies or something? He must have known.
because somebody had to tell Mary.
Yeah.
I don't think he'd make that public right away.
Right. Okay, so we have, all right, so Mary knows, she brings it to Jesus' attention. The next step,
Why are you talking to me about this?
that's right. And then what happened? But then what does Mary do? We can almost consider that a rebuff or a rebuke. What does Mary do?
She just plows ahead.
She tells the servants to listen to Jesus and do what he says.
That's right. And then almost immediately, what does Jesus tell the servants to do?
Fill
The
water.
jars of water.
And I meant to bring the picture and I forgot this morning. Okay, I
How
know in
big
our
is it?
mind, the 20 to 30 gallons, so like
Yeah.
that's a garbage can
Yeah.
size.
Yeah.
You have to realize they're stone. I have a picture of me standing in Israel, and I'm not kidding you, the thing comes up to here on me. There's no way that thing could be moved. So I found it very interesting that they were purification jars, because I said to Robert, I don't know how they ever cleaned them out, because they didn't have hoses and running, I mean, seriously. But, so just the fact that these are purification jars, Jesus tells them to fill them with water. Okay, do the math. Six jars, 30 gallons, it says they filled them to the brim. How much wine are we talking about? 180 gallons.
Depends on how big that wedding was.
That's right. Okay, now this is where you might need to take a look in your Bible, and I want to say, what is the end result? What happens? And if you look at, as I might say, who is privy to this miracle is really the way I wanted to word it.
The master of the banquet. He doesn't say that the servants did. They just filled the jars with water, that's all.
That's an interesting point, because I took it the other way. Okay, so the steward, I don't know if that's what you want to call him, of the ceremony, he knows that it's good wine. I'm not sure if he knows that Jesus did the miracle. We know the servants know that they filled it with water, and they took it to him. So what I would assume, and then if someone would read verse 11 aloud.
This, the first of his miraculous signs, Jesus performed in Cana of Galilee. He thus revealed his glory, and his disciples put their faith in him.
Okay, so that's kind of the line that I want to emphasize is the very last phrase, his disciples put their faith in him. My translation says believed. That's kind of the springboard that I want to use as we're looking at the next signs as to what it is. What is the end result of the sign? So,
The end result of the sign is people believe in Jesus.
okay, let's jump ahead. Any other comments on that one before we jump ahead? That's kind of the format we're gonna do
Yeah,
now.
we just did this one in religion in second grade this week. So we talk about how Jesus is showing that he's not just a normal guy. He is the Son of God, and yeah, like the disciples are now seeing that what's up with this guy? He's not a normal guy.
Do you also see how, I'll say, blessed, subtle he is?
Yeah, he's not.
Nobody knows who did
Yeah,
that.
it's not a big show or to do.
No, it's not an abracadabra.
Yeah, that's what we talk about too. It's not magic.
Thunder and lightning
It's
type thing.
yeah.
It suddenly draws some out of the jar. What was in the jar? Water, draw some out.
Yeah.
Ooh, this isn't water anymore. And it's like, how did that happen? It's like, that's the way, I think, quite honestly, that's the way Jesus likes to work. But you don't even know he did it until after he's done.
Done it, yeah.
And then God gets the glory.
Yeah.
And I don't think he wanted to bring the attention to the bridegroom that didn't order enough wine. They run out,
Mhm.
you know, so.
Huge embarrassment for them. I mean, that was like a,
Yeah, because that
Yes.
was, his big party.
that's right, so also notice the quantity. You know, we don't know how many guests, we don't know how much wine they had to start with. But all I can think of is this was quite a bit in comparison. I mean, you know, the servants were probably overwhelmed. It was like, we have to fill all these and everybody's here. I mean, you know. So, all right, let's move to the next miracle then, or the next sign. John chapter 4, verses 46 to 54. This one, you know, so who are some of the main characters in this story, if you wanna just take a peruse through it?
It's in Cana again.
No, read carefully.
Oh,
Read verse 46. So he came again to Cana in Galilee,
Yeah.
which is Jesus, where he had made the water wine. And at Capernaum, there was an official whose son was ill.
oh.
Okay, so this one is taking place in,
Capernaum.
and that's like 20 miles away, okay? So they're not right there. So we have this official, and he's coming to Jesus. And what is his demeanor as he approaches Jesus?
You can tell from his words.
Begging him to come.
He was
Yeah,
begging.
The word is,
Oh.
actually is begging.
And my Bible says implored.
Yeah, okay. Now, what's the situation with his son? How serious is this? It says he's close to death.
Mhm.
And then, so we have that, the official also addresses Jesus as sir. And one of the things that I read said that was a term of respect, but also a recognition of he recognized Jesus' authority by addressing Jesus as sir. So what's the remedy here according to verse 50?
The son is gonna live.
Right, we have Jesus' words, and then what else do we see? It says the son is gonna live, but what else accompanies that?
Permission to go.
And the end of verse 50?
The man took Jesus at his word. He believed him.
Mm-hmm. So here we have now a
This is-
single person, but it says the man took Jesus at his word and believed him and went on his way. Now, just to give you a little idea, I mean, I'm assuming this man, let's take a look at verses 52 and 53. Yeah, or 51 through 53. And it said, as he was going down, his servants met him and told him that his son was recovering. So he asked the hour when he began to get better, and they said to him, yesterday at the seventh hour, the fever left him. So the whole idea is that we know this was a distance because it took him from yesterday, 7th hour is probably noon to 1, to get home. And so now the connection, and will someone read verse 53, please?
So the father knew that it was at the same hour in which Jesus said to him, "Your son lives." And he himself believed, and his whole household.
Okay, so now see the expanse a little bit more. It's like the man believed first because he left. He went and took Jesus at his word, and he left to go back home. But now suddenly, the work is getting greater. And now, obviously, I would say he told his servants. He must have been a man at means. He had servants. He told his servants, it says he himself and all his household. And then the conclusion is this is the second sign. Okay, so we're still in Galilee. This is just a little thing. Galilee's in the north part of the Holy Land, so just to set your frame of reference there. Any other comments or questions on that one? Okay.
A little exasperation on Jesus' part. Unless you guys see signs and wonders, you won't believe.
Oh, there it comes.
Yeah.
And I find it was interesting
Sarcasm.
that he's only done really one visible sign yet at this point.
Yes.
But, you know.
But the Israelites, they were always asking for signs, right? I mean, that was in their history. Give me a sign. They were big on signs.
Well, and you also get the impression that in various parts of the gospel, is that Jesus went to such and such a place, and he healed their sick.
Wow.
You know,
Yeah.
so that it was like an ongoing thing for Jesus. So that's why these in John are noteworthy. That means we need to look for the patterns. But I think, and of course, that's what we began with. These things are written right before that phrase. These things, many other things are written that
Yeah.
Jesus did many other things that are not recorded.
It would like fill more books than we have or something. It's
Right,
like-
that's a
yeah.
little bit later in that
It's
same
in-
chapter.
yeah, later on.
Right.
A little bit of hyperbole that if they were all recorded, we could not hold
The world could not
the world could
contain
not
all
hold
of
the
those.
books. Well, I'd say that's, yes, good hyperbole, but needless to say, who knows how many people Jesus healed? Countless.
Yeah.
And I was just picking up on what Carol had said about that whole thing about unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe. Even just think of one of his disciples. Who is the famous one that we think of?
Nobody counts.
Yeah.
I mean,
He was there for everything.
Right, post-resurrection. He's been there for everything. And he said, unless I see him with my eyes and put my hand in his side and see the nails in his hand, I will not believe. So that very much is, they were a seen believing.
Seeing is believing. That's where it started.
Okay? Any other comments or things just from glancing at that? All right, let's move on to John 5. And I put verses 1 through 18, and a lot of times, you know, the miracle part in that is just in the first couple verses, but I like the end verses often because that is where you get, you know, you see the remedy or the ramifications of it. So let's start. What's the story here?
A feast.
No,
No,
Where are
John
we?
5, verses 1 through,
it says after
18.
this there was a feast of the Jews.
oh, that's true. So what's the timing then, probably?
What feast was it?
One of those Jewish holidays.
Yeah.
So people are gathered, Jewish people are gathered.
Sure, yeah,
Okay.
okay.
And where are we now?
Jerusalem.
We're in Jerusalem, so we've come the 100 miles plus south. We're now in Jerusalem. Okay, and let's get a little specific. Where are we?
At the sheep gate.
At the sheep gate and narrower? We're at
At
the
the pool at the sheep gate.
At the pool at the sheep gate, that's right. Can you imagine that scene? I mean, that's where all it says there lay a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, and paralyzed. I mean, it probably was not a place you wanted. I mean, you would probably want to like walk like this, you know, through it, because it's like, you know, there's all these people that are sick, and yet we know that Jesus goes kind of right in the midst of them. All right, let's get narrowed down to a little more specifics. Who's, if you want to say the key factor, and what do we know, or the key person, and what do we know about him?
He's 38.
Doesn't say.
He's been an invalid
For 38 years.
So he's at least 40. Right.
So he's been an invalid for 38 years, and what else do we know about him?
He's got no friends to help him.
That is what we picked up too, that I hadn't thought about. It's like, there's no one to help me. You know, I'm here. Every time I want to try to get in,
You're in a place where by definition, everybody needs help.
Yeah.
What's the story on the pool itself?
It has to ripple or something, right? The waters have to be stirred and then you gotta pop in there real quick.
And who comes and stirs the water? See, now this
That's
is
magic.
Well, you're close, because it's actually, I think the best interpretation is that it's legend. That
Okay.
it must have happened somewhere along the line.
Mhm.
That's why they're waiting for it to happen again. That the angel comes down and stirs the water. Now, you don't get the idea that this is a regular occurrence. But when you heard that it happened once, and you are in this hopeless situation, what have you got to lose? So I'm gonna make sure, and where did they come up with the idea that only the first person gets healed? Again, it's part of the legend, part of the tradition, is that when the water gets stirred, first one in gets healed. Now, you think about that on its face, who are all these people? They are, how would they
it says
describe?
blind, paralyzed, and lame.
So if that isn't the cruelest of jokes, okay, as soon as the water gets stirred, you have to get in and then.
Hop right in.
Yeah, and you
Oh,
can't.
one problem, I can't move.
See, yeah,
I
that's
can't
right.
see. So, we don't have enough info about this other than this is a place that had become known as a healing place. Which was probably based in that there probably was a genuine healing occurrence there somewhere along the line. And the tradition and the legend just stuck, and so, but that's then what makes this a more genuine, hopeless situation. Because when does the angel come to stir the water?
I don't know.
We don't know, but he might, and if he does, you better be here.
So notice in verse 6, what does Jesus ask the man?
Do you want to get well?
Yeah, do you want to get well? It's like, duh, been waiting here for 38 years, no, maybe not that long, but, it seems, but now how does the man respond?
Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, but while I am coming, another steps down in the.
So, does he answer Jesus' question? Do you want to be healed?
No.
He
just
doesn't
gave out an
answer.
excuse.
He just is like, he doesn't say, yes, I want to be healed, that's why I'm here. That's kind of an important distinction, just, as we see this man being healed in contrast to the other ones. Because it's just like, do we even know if this guy has any faith? So then let's talk about what's the remedy. If you jump ahead to verse 8, what happens?
We get healed. Right?
Jesus'
Yeah.
words are,
Get up, pick up your mat and walk.
Oh boy.
something that, first of all, he's probably not been able to get up. Secondly, pick up his mat. You know, we don't exactly know, but it's like, okay, get up, physical thing, and then it's like, pick up your mat. That means you have to have strength, and then walk. I mean, that sounded like probably 3 impossible tasks to him. I mean, it's not like, oh, let's just pick up and let's go. So that's what we kind of want to start to focus in, is on the hopeless perspective that some of these people might have had. This is a way overwhelming thing. There's no way I can do this. And then, but what do we know happens?
Gets up, takes up his mat, and walks.
And he walks. And as we look at this, what day of the week was this?
Sabbath.
The Sabbath, okay. So that brings in a few other little challenges, is it? As it were. But I want to jump down to kind of verse 14, and we talk about the results. We know the man has taken up his bed and that, and but now let's read, if someone would read verses 14 through 17 out loud, please. Ray, you want to read them, please?
Yeah, what was that again?
14 through 17.
Okay. Later Jesus found him at the temple and said to him, "See, you are well again. Stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you." The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. So, because Jesus was doing these things on the Sabbath, the Jews persecuted him.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus said to them, "My Father is always at work to this very day, and I too am working." For this reason, the Jews tried all the harder to kill him. Not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was even calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God.
Okay, so when I talked about the end result, now we're going to start seeing different reactions. You know, so what do we notice about the man? It says Jesus sought him out in the temple. You know, it wasn't like he came to Jesus again. Jesus sought him out and gives him a word of caution, as it were. You know, it says the man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who healed him. And then we see, so we have the one reaction of the man who was healed. And now I would say, what is one of the other results? What do you see starting to happen now? Yep, the persecution is starting to heat up. The persecution is starting to heat up. And that phrase, my Father is working until now and I am working, I probably spent, you know, I've pretty much gone through the first 11 chapters of John. I won't say with a fine-tooth comb in the last couple weeks, but I really have. That phrase about work, my food is to do the work of him who sent me, it's a very interesting thing that Jesus uses that term a lot about working. And he always uses it in conjunction with his Father. So, you know, that was the real irritant, is that Jesus was calling himself, you know, the Son of God. And that's when we get back to all these signs point that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God. At work. And now people are starting to see that. So, anything else on this one?
It maybe is too involved to talk about, but, you know, it said, you know, God created the whole world and everything, and then he rested. And isn't that how the Sabbath was supposed to start? I mean, that's why they had the Sabbath, because God rested.
Mm-hmm.
And so now Jesus is kind of giving a new definition to the Sabbath, right? Isn't he? I mean,
Very good.
They
You know?
had given a new definition to the Sabbath, because
Yeah.
picking up your
Carol, I
mat,
like that.
is that work?
yeah,
Is
that it's getting into that whole thing that
They really corrupted the
their
Sabbath.
all those rules and regulations that they made. I think they totally were misunderstanding what the meaning of the Sabbath was.
And remember, Jesus says at one time, I am the Lord of the Sabbath. You know, it was like the Sabbath was made for man
Yeah.
to rest. Man was not necessarily made for the Sabbath. And
That he says that one after they were eating the wheat, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay.
right. Okay?
But the idea of keeping the Sabbath was, at least in the Pharisees' idea, is that's how we will bring in God's blessing and His goodness. That's how we'll be rescued from the oppression of Rome, is we need to obey the law. And that means keeping the Sabbath. And if you are not obeying the law and not keeping the Sabbath, you are going to bring more destruction upon us. That's the intensity that founded their reaction,
Mm-hmm.
is that, what, you want Rome to come and invade? It's like,
Yeah.
you're working on the Sabbath. You want them to come and invade us again? That was their line of thinking. It was very much an intensity in that. That's why they went off in such incredible directions about what did it mean to keep the Sabbath and what was breaking the Sabbath. So that's part of the reason, not that just that they saw Jesus as a lawbreaker, but that Jesus, if you keep this up, Rome's gonna come marching in and everything we have is gonna be lost.
They whined a lot, didn't they?
That's part of their function.
Yeah, right. So that's the beginning of the whole works righteousness idea, that there's some, and that gets me to a question about, well, what's the significance, I don't get it, about, you know, I go on and there's nothing I can do to be saved, okay? But the stories, the man had to do something. Is there some significance to that? That Jesus said to him, you don't, I look at it this way, I can heal you, but you have to do something too? Am I getting the wrong message there? With the get up and walk?
Well, I think you have to think is, so faith apart from works is dead, right? So how do you show your faith?
Oh.
If you don't show
If
it
you
through
don't
your actions.
Get up,
If-
pick up your mat.
There you
And
go,
walk.
thank you. Okay,
Right,
that straightens me out.
I mean, cause that's the same thing, I mean, that official. I mean, if he didn't take Jesus at his word, if he didn't go, like you said, he wouldn't have known that his son was gonna be healed. But by his very going, he
Mhm.
communicated, he believed.
Mhm.
So, important distinction. We're gonna talk a little bit more about the bad theology of the Pharisees when we get to another one.
Okay.
Let's move this one quickly, feeding of the 5,000. Now, we've talked a little bit about hopeless situations, so just from this one is John chapter 6, 1 through 15. What do you know about this situation, or the feeding of the 5,000, that makes this kind of more of a hopeless situation, okay?
It's not just 5,000 people,
Yeah.
it's 5,000
Men,
men.
yeah.
That's right.
And probably 6,000 women and a couple thousand kids.
You are right, okay.
1,000 family.
Yeah.
So the quantity alone is overwhelming. What else makes this seem like a hopeless situation?
We have no money.
Right. You know, I think Philip makes the comment that, 200 denarii would not buy enough bread for each one to get just a little bite. That's in verse 7. 200 denarii was 200 days of work, and that's over a year. I mean, over a half a year.
And also, where are they gonna get that amount of food?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
they're not
They're-
in any big city.
No,
Right.
they're out in
Right.
the country, aren't they?
Right.
Yeah. They're out in the boonies.
That is right. Okay, so then what happens, or what's the remedy, or how does the sign take place? What is the key then?
Jesus rolls his eyes at the disciples. What do we got?
That's it. There's our common element. Jesus rolled his
And he says, what do we have?
Mhm.
Let's roll up our sleeves. Let's get going. What do we have, first of all? Very good.
And verse 11 says,
And Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to the disciples, and the disciples to those sitting down, and likewise of the fish as much as they wanted.
so now we're getting into the remedy. Remember we were talking about the quantity of wine? And so what's the end result? after this?
Everybody ate.
Everybody ate, and did they get enough to eat?
Yeah, they have leftovers,
They had leftovers. How many?
12 baskets full.
Do you think those 5 loaves, even if you ripped them all apart, would fit 12 baskets?
No.
So that's the thing. This is like, so while the hopeless situation, Jesus answers in a way above and beyond anybody's expectation or thought or anticipation. And just it says everyone, and when they had eaten their fill. So it's not like, Philip was saying, well, they'll get a bite if I would buy, use 200 denarii. No, this is above and beyond. And I think it's interesting, it says they picked up the 12 baskets of fragments from the 5 barley loaves. And I'm like, were they supposed to be picking up food from somewhere else? I mean, but it specifically mentions it was 12 baskets from 5 loaves. And so now we have seen the result. We've seen many, and then what is the conclusion or the result of that? The people's conclusion. Verse 14.
He's a prophet.
Mm-hmm. And not only a prophet, he is the one. Right. They've had a lot of prophets, but I think, they've been waiting a long time for the prophet who was foretold. So now we have the crowds saying, this is indeed the prophet who was to come. So we're getting Jesus's audience, as it were. He's starting to let his miracles be seen by a bigger crowd, as it were. So,
And also, this is the first one where he had direct touch. The first 3, he didn't do anything.
Good point.
Spoke,
Words,
yeah.
but he never touched anybody. And then this one, healing the blind man. Those are.
that's right.
Can you imagine about, I know a lot of people believe because of this but can you imagine some practical people saying, we gotta stick with this guy, he feeds us.
Well, the other gospels bring that out.
Yeah. I mean, he's
They
like,
put 2 and 2 together and said, we need to stick with Jesus because when I get hungry, I know where to go.
yeah, we're all gonna get a stimulus package.
Okay, any other comments or observation about the 5,000?
This was big.
Okay, so we're
This
getting
is a
bigger.
big.
15,000, I'm gonna say. All right, then just further on in your Bible there, John 6, 16 through 21. Okay, what's the situation here?
16.
Well, Jesus went off by himself because he knew they wanted to make him king. So the disciples were still left there, and come evening they decided, let's take the boat across.
Mm-hmm.
Which I find interesting, when they knew Jesus was still somewhere right in the hills.
they didn't worry about him, huh?
Maybe he left them a parting,
I'll meet you.
I'll meet you over there.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we know it's evening, so this happened earlier in the day. What else, what kind of weather are we having?
Not good.
Nasty.
Strong wind was blowing.
Oh, yeah, stormy.
Right? And what else do we know?
They were practically in the middle of the lake.
Because it says they had rowed 3 to 4 miles.
Ooh, how many
And-
miles is that lake?
Well,
Is it like Lake Michigan or no?
oh no,
It's
no,
not
no,
as
no.
big,
This is
right?
the Sea of Galilee. This is
Yeah.
very small.
Right.
Very small.
What's the one by Oshkosh?
Winnebago?
Winnebago.
Winnebago, it's probably similar to that, which is a shallow lake that when the wind blows, it gets nasty.
Oh, does it ever?
Yeah.
It's because it's shallow.
Yeah, it is. So it's rough winds. It's dark. It's rough winds. They've been rowing. Okay, so you can say it kind of looks like kind of a hopeless situation. And then what is the remedy? In verse 20, what do we see happening?
This is where my wife and I disagree as to what the real miracle is. Most people say the miracle is that Jesus walked on the water. I think the real miracle comes at the end of the section.
At least you wanna read 20 and 21 out loud, please?
Yeah. But he said to them, "It is I, don't be afraid." Then they were willing to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat reached the shore where they were heading.
See, to me, that's the better miracle. Is they take Jesus into the boat and suddenly it's like, oh, we're here.
Immediately.
No, we were genuinely in the middle of the lake and now we're next to the shore. How did that happen? But, you know, that usually doesn't get referred to as the miracle of the instantaneous trip across the lake.
Yeah.
But that's really what it is. It's like, this isn't where we started, but it is where we ended.
And I'm sure, having been on the Sea of Galilee, they probably had more than a few storms that came up. And so while you read all the different gospels, they all have, you know, this one doesn't say, you know, peace be still or anything like this. I would say this probably happened, you know, more than once.
Yep.
And that's probably why Jesus would get exasperated at them, because it's like, haven't you seen this before? But, okay, now we're gonna go into the one that we wanna spend a little more time on. So move ahead to John chapter 9. And there is just a ton in this passage, and I would really encourage you just to take it and pick it apart, almost, if I want to say, verse by verse. So this one we're going to spend a little bit more time, you know, actually reading a couple verses in this one. So would somebody read verses 1 through, actually I'm going to have you read 1 through 5, please.
As he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Neither this man nor his parents sinned," said Jesus, "but this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in his life. As long as it is day, we must do the work of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world."
Okay, thank you. So what's kind of the overwhelming or hopeless situation in this one?
And we're blind.
The man is born blind, okay? So that, you know, blind from birth. And the reason I had Mary read this up through verse 5 there, what do we, in verse 4 again, Jesus talks about doing what?
Work of him who sent me.
And he says, we. Did you notice that? It's not just I. We
I
must
like
work.
that.
And I wanted to point that out, and that comes up in Lazarus' resurrection too. It's more that, you know, we must work. And so it's like, no, yes, salvation is a gift. I don't want to, you know, misconstrue that in any ways. Just like Jesus sought out the man in the temple afterwards, you're going to see the same thing. Jesus reaches out to us, but we have a response to that, you know, that's part of our faith. But I like Jesus' lesson. What is he, you know, they want to know, there's always someone looking for blame. You know, whose fault was it that this guy was born blind? And what does Jesus respond?
It's because he was born blind so that he could show God's work.
Right. This gets back to Jesus revealing himself as the Son of God. Because nothing like this, you know, born blind, I mean, that is just like a hopeless situation, as it were.
Counters the immediate argument. Jesus says, no, it was not, this man was a sinful, or his parents were sinful, that's not it. So he immediately kiboshes the conventional wisdom. He's blind because somebody sinned. Jesus says, no, not because somebody sinned.
Blind because Adam sinned.
Right.
Doesn't even say
Well,
that.
I know,
But because of sin, that's right.
But it's also interesting that it kind of says then that God had this person born blind so that this work could be shown at a later time.
Now, do you want to be that person? God said, oh, you're gonna be born blind so I can do work for you. Why me?
I know, that's one of the many, many mysteries we wrestle with. Why does God allow bad things to happen?
Stuff,
And
yeah.
the general answer, why does God allow bad things to happen? So that God can show us through Jesus the source of good things.
And I don't know if it's, whether, I'm sure it's intentional, but verse 5, the very last phrase of verse 5, Jesus says, I am the light of the world. Jesus uses that phrase in John chapter 8, where he talks about himself being the light of the world. But contrast, this is a person who has lived in total darkness forever. And now Jesus is saying, I am the light of the world. So just, even put it in that context, and in that situation, context, to realize what those words must have been. Because this guy's never seen light.
I read a commentary once that said he may not have even had eyes, because that would have really nailed him.
Well, I would disagree with that based on what the next couple verses say.
Oh, I didn't read ahead, sorry.
No, that's okay.
This is where he
But-
rubbed them on, is this, okay, you can tell I didn't read ahead.
Okay, how about someone read verses 6 and 7.
Having said this, he spit on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. Go, he told him, wash in the pool of Siloam. This word means sent. So the man went and washed and came home seeing.
So it gets back to the same thing, how did he even get to that pool? He's blind. We're talking about the man who had to get into the water. But what did he have to do? He had to
Go do something.
He had to go.
Uh-huh.
Go wash. And to Carol's point before too, notice that this now, before Jesus handled the bread, now suddenly we have Jesus touching the man.
Yeah, and with mud, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, I don't know if your Bible said he anointed the man's eyes. Was that the word you used, or what was your?
It just says put it on.
Oh,
Okay, I think that's ESV.
Mine says anointed.
so does mine, and I thought that was a very interesting word because Jesus is called the Messiah, the anointed one, and we know kings were anointed. And usually when you think of anointing, you usually think of oil on the head or something. You don't think of, mud on the eye. So I found that was an interesting word. I, don't know if that was.
Well, see, what's the original word?
We didn't
What's
look it
the
up.
Greek
That
or the Hebrew?
I forgot. I know. It was
Yeah,
kind of.
but it would
It
be-
was a thought I had last night,
it
kind of
would be
late.
anointed, which simply means just as there's a broader definition to baptize, which is simply applying water, even, and this is from the scriptures, even when you do the dishes, you're baptizing them
Right,
because you're applying water. So in the same way, he
yeah.
anointed the man's eyes, which means he simply applied
Some-
whatever needed to be applied.
So on this one, okay, so guess what day of the week it is again?
Sabbath?
It's the Sabbath day, okay? So Jesus is really making this point that I am Lord of the Sabbath. And so now we see the ire of the Pharisees starting to escalate. If you read, so the Pharisees ask him again, how do you see? And he says, he put mud in my eyes, I washed and see. I'm in verse 16. Some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God, for he doesn't keep the Sabbath. But others said, how can a sinner do such signs? And there was a division among them. And I want to point that out, because when we get to the end of this and we see who believes, this division is starting to kind of crack into the ranks of the Pharisees, and probably who is one of the one or two most well-known Pharisees that we know became followers of Jesus. Nicodemus and, yeah, Joseph of Arimathea.
Oh,
So, yeah, so, you know, so the thing is, you start to see how the Spirit works in people's lives. You know, this is starting to be, you know, a little division as it washed. And, so let's see, what do I had for my next note? So anyway, cause I have so many notes on this one that it was,
See,
this
he
one's
come to
like.
you in the night.
So anyway, you know, it's like, how can a man do this if he's, and it says, the Jews did not believe that he had been blind and had not received his sight until they called the parents. And then they go in
So
and,
what is one of the most common arguments against the things that Jesus has done? Just flat out denial.
Yes.
He didn't do it.
Mhm.
And they have to overcome like 3 different hurdles, not just overcoming that basic denial. It's like, well, first, no, you weren't blind. We got the wrong guy. That's number one. Then it's like, get his parents. Is that really your son? Huh? You know, it gets to ridiculous extremes to simply to prove a miraculous event. So it shows you how blind the Pharisees really were.
so if we read verses 22 and 23, it says, his parents said these things because they feared the Jews, because the parents said, ask him. For the Jews had already agreed that if anyone should confess Jesus to be the Christ, he was to be put out of the synagogue. So when we talk about what is the, you know, what is one of the results of this healing, what's gonna happen to this guy? Excommunicated, if you wanna say it that way. I mean, he is gonna be.
He's gonna lose his membership.
Yeah. And I'd like you, we're not gonna do it now, but in verses 24 to 34, I would just like you to look in your Bible and see how many times it's like, they called the man, he said, they said, he said, they said. There's at least 7 different exchanges of information from verses 24 to 34. And part of the reason I just wanna mention that is that, you know, dialogue with someone who does not believe is still important to have. And as you read the dialogue of this blind man, he didn't back down. I mean, he kept saying, this is what I know. These are the facts. And I think his words in, so we see that they were already, you know, the persecution was coming. We see in verse 428 when he and they're going back and forth, and you know, and it says, and they reviled him, saying, you are his disciples, but we are disciples of Moses. But then we get down to verses 30 to 34, and I think this is so encapsulizes it when it says in verses 30 to 34, and it says, the man answered, why, this is an amazing thing. You do not know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, God listens to him. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone has opened the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. That's where I was saying we were talking about this bad theology before, because it says, you know, God does not listen to sinners. Well, that means God doesn't listen to any of us.
Yeah, I was.
So you know, that was part. But this gets into the point where it says, you know, never has this been done, where a man has had the eyes opened of a man born blind. And so, you know, the heated dialogue and discussion continues to grow. And then in verse 34, if someone would read that one.
To this they replied, you were steeped in sin at birth, how dare you lecture us? And they threw him out.
It's pretty strong words.
There's another strategy of the opposition. when they don't know what to say, they just insult you. You've been a sinner from before. It's like, whoa, you know that?
So, as we talk about this, we see that Jesus opened his eyes, but we see that Jesus opened his spiritual eyes. So it's both
Yes.
a physical and a spiritual healing there. And when you, if you read verse 35, it says, Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and having found him, he said, do you believe in the Son of Man? So this gets back to Jesus sought him out, and then Jesus says, do you believe in the Son of Man? And the man answered,
Who is he, Lord, that I may believe in him?
right. So the man, the man was blind. He didn't know what Jesus looked like. He didn't know who Jesus was. And then Jesus says to him, if you think about it, he hadn't seen him.
Yeah, this whole seeing thing is kind of new to me.
But he wasn't healed in the presence of Jesus either. Jesus sent him to wash. He never saw him.
And then Jesus says, you have seen me, you have seen him, and it is he who's speaking to him. And then verse 38, what is this man's response?
Lord, I believe.
And
Worship him.
he worshipped him. That's talking about opening the eyes, both spiritually and physical eyes, to see. And so we're not going to get into Lazarus today, but so I want you kind of to dig it apart. That's part of me. I always want to make sure that, the purpose of teaching is we've been giving you a lot of spoonfuls of things, but we want you to dig a little deeper. So, I mentioned a few things about the works, about the glory, about the miracle that's never been done before, things like that. So I want you kind of just to spend some time over the week, looking at Lazarus. There's a ton of things in the story of Lazarus. And, read the entire chapter, 1 through 53, because there's lots of insights, lots of dialogues. And when we talked about that rift kind of happening, where you will see, notice who believes after Lazarus is raised, and kind of how the persecution increases. and
So now we
everything.
can answer that question. What do these things have in common, right? You said we would know by the end.
Well, what do they have in common?
People believe,
People believe.
and Jesus became known, and the whole thing is unfolded. The whole thing's starting out.
And the thing is, those who witness the sign, it's both polarization and it's belief. There are those who believed and embraced, and then there are those who rejected, persecuted, reviled.
Roiled people up, didn't it? It really did.
So,
And there eventually are people who have to work harder at not believing it than those who would believe it.
Yeah. Wow, it's just, was like that then, and it's like that now.
That's right.
So one thing I realized, yes, I do have the sheets there, but I have the wrong date on them. So while they say January 17th, it is Epiphany 3, it is the 7 signs. So if you want to pick up one of those to look afterwards, you can. But I realized I forgot to change the date on it, so my apologies. So I want to close with prayer.
Let's pray. Thank you, Heavenly Father, for your spirit at work through your word in us, as we have all seen something new, learned something new, and now give us something new to share with someone who does not know. As we thank you for this time together, as we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
So we have, next time there is gonna be, do we continue?